So I read an interesting piece on the Times of London today, talking to neighbours in and around Sandringham, and the reporter who was there was saying that there was a feeling amongst younger people that they spoke to that, you know, Andrew is awful and he needs to go and he's a drag on the royal family. But a lot of older people who would have known Andrew for all their entire lives, I suppose, are somewhat more sympathetic. How much sympathy is there for Andrew?
I mean, from what I can measure, it doesn't seem like the sympathy goes particularly far or particularly deep. Even before we get into his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, even we get into what he's being investigated here for, which is misconduct in public office and allegedly using his time as the trade envoy to potentially pass on information to Jeffrey Epstein or anyone else which they might have been able to benefit from in some way, shape or form. Even before we get into all of that, you know, Prince Andrew was seen as a bit of a playboy, seen as the one who was, again, kind of jet setting and getting up to things that he might not otherwise have been getting up to if he wasn't a member of the royal family. So I don't think there's ever really been a tremendous amount of sympathy or affection for Prince Andrew, but we're in an entirely different territory now. On the sort of question of whether or not he's been hard done by, it's a difficult thing to talk about a royal being hard done by in the best of times. But I think one thing which is slightly unfortunate is that these very kind of this narrow investigation into misconduct in public office is being used by some of his critics and some critics of the monarchy to vindicate the idea that he was up to his necks in whatever depraved activities Jeffrey Epstein may or may not have been getting up to in relation to sexual assault and trafficking. That's clearly not what this investigation is about. Andrew's always denied any wrongdoing, and I think it's quite important that whilst people are well within their rights to judge Andrew for what he's being investigated for here, this doesn't kind of vindicate the broader narrative that he was, as I say, directly implicated in anything else that might have been swirling around the internet that we've been talking about.
It feels a bit perverse me saying this, but the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in some way must be feeling a bit relieved because, of course, all the heat when it came to the Epstein files until now, or a lot of the heat, had been on him and his appointment of Lord Peter Mandelson as their ambassador to the United States. Now you suddenly have a much bigger story on the scene. Surely for Sir Keir, that's some welcome air.
I think you're right. As you say, it feels perverse to say it, but I think it has taken some of the heat off of the Prime Minister, because if it was only a week or so ago that it felt like one of the main kind of casualties of this latest round of the Epstein files being released was going to be Keir Starmer's government himself. That when Peter Mandelson, again, not too long ago, our ambassador in Washington, was himself being investigated, was himself having his properties raided and searched, that this raised questions about the Prime Minister and his judgment. So I guess here we've got someone even more unsympathetic to various members of the public in the form of Andrew being investigated and takes some of the heat off of Starmer and suggests, I suppose, kind of feeds the sense that this is a broader problem with the establishment. This wasn't just one ambassador who shouldn't have been appointed by a Prime Minister under fire. So, yeah, perverse, as you say, but nevertheless it has taken some of the heat off of the embattled PM.
Indeed. Tom Slater, thank you for joining me.